Welcome to the Everyday Matters podcast, a show from Netsmart. Everyday Matters is about the opportunity we have to make a difference. Our collective, cause-connected mission is about impacting healthcare in meaningful ways. We seek to provide a place to share stories about the progress being made, how to overcome challenges, and ideas to inspire. Each conversation is about the work being done and the opportunity before us. Whether it's about advocacy, awareness, or challenging stigmas, we know that together anything and everything is possible. Let's get into the show where we learn from yesterday in pursuit of tomorrow. Here, we all work to ensure every day matters.
Welcome, everybody, to another Everyday Matters podcast. And today we have another guest with us as we continue the opportunity that we've had to speak with organizations in our various communities who are making a difference in each and everything that they do, the lives that they're impacting, the stories that they're changing, really what they're doing and things that we don't often hear about. And that's what this podcast is all about, is an opportunity to share those stories and make us all more aware. And today's guest is a little different for me because I've known Michael Wilson now, how many years?
A few.
Even more interesting is you used to be a part of Netsmart. You were an associate here serving cause and community, and now you're doing that even differently. And our paths and connection and relationship is to continue to stay in touch as we look for ways that we can help each other. And what Michael and I are going to do today is talk about Community LINC, which is the program you're a part of. You're the executive director. How long have you been there?
7 months.
And I'm sure it feels a lot longer than 7 months.
7 years?
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing. And we'll jump into that and we'll talk about some of the interesting things that the organization is doing. And then we'll also talk about those things that we can do and how we press into those topics. And, you know, Michael, when you were here, we were just beginning to talk about social determinants of health. And that is care beyond care, how vocation, housing, nutrition, friendship, relationships all make a difference. And as I began to learn more about this program that you became a part of, I was like, those are the things that you're absolutely impacting. But before we go into that, let's begin with your story. If you can give a brief little introduction of who you are, and then let's talk about some of those macro things that you and your team are focused on.
Michael Wilson, Community LINC Executive Director. I've been there, like I said, 7 months. Worked in corporate America for 20-some years. As you mentioned, I came to Netsmart probably around 2018. Did a life plan. Guys are at 55 years old, probably shouldn't do life plans, but coming out of that, I came up with a mission statement, and the mission statement drove me to coming from the side of kind of helping nonprofits to getting into that nonprofit world. So I've been in the nonprofit world for the past 5 years. I've been in a couple different shelters in town, and now I'm at Community LINC.
So pretty exciting, lots going on. Even in the last 5 years, a ton has changed. You've navigated a pandemic in that period of time, which fundamentally turned everything upside down in the worlds that we're serving. Let's first begin by some of the bigger challenges or opportunities that are happening, and that I know your organization is directly impacting. And before we get into the programs, let's talk about them. Let's begin with homelessness. Homelessness is a word that we're hearing more often. We know that the current economic environment and across America and across the world, we've seen those challenges. To the person who may be listening who isn't as closely connected to it, how do you describe homelessness? Because even with that word, there's stigma associated with that. You mind sharing with our audience how we should be thinking about that?
A simple definition of homelessness is those people who are living in spaces that were not designed to be inhabited by human beings.
Right.
So that's in cars, underneath trains, underneath bridges. So homelessness, basically that's what it is. Our city right now is going through what they call a point in time survey.
Yeah.
So they're physically trying to count all of those who are experiencing homelessness in Kansas City. Sometimes what we miss are we have folks who are experiencing homelessness that may be living in a hotel.
Yeah.
They're still by definition homeless.
Right.
HUD has a couple different definitions of homelessness, and then there's a McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness. So homelessness at its simplest is living somewhere that wasn't designed to be lived in. Some definition of homelessness, going back to the hotel, would say, well, if they're living in a hotel, they're technically not homelessness.
Right.
Well, that's not a home. It's not designed to be a home. So there's no really one definition of homelessness. We actually use two different definitions. HUD has 4 categories of homelessness. We kind of deal with 3 of those. I won't get into the specifics. And then there's a McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness, which is basically looking out for those kiddos who are in school and making sure they don't fall behind, which is our sweet spot.
And so I think because homelessness in itself has a stigma associated with it. People hear homelessness and immediately some thoughts and images conjure up, and probably not always healthy ones. A word I like to use just to challenge the narrative or to disrupt status quo is unhoused.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, people are like, what do you mean by unhoused? And it leads into that conversation, if you will. And I think that's one of the things we as a community have to think about. And, let's also kind of jump into this topic as well. Homelessness is everywhere. It's just not always seen. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I actually live in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And people think there's not homelessness in the suburbs. I won't give you the name of the city, but there's a city not far from my house that has a tremendous homeless population. They actually open a shelter in the winter to handle that.
Yeah.
And if you drive off of any, and I do mean any off-ramp in Kansas City, there's folks flying signs these days.
Yeah.
So homelessness is in your community. I have family members, quite frankly, who are definitely homeless because they're living in mom and dad's basement or they're living with a friend. The folks that you see on TV that are experiencing homelessness, the reason they're homeless is their support systems have broken down. So you have folks in suburban Kansas City, their support systems haven't broken down, but they don't have jobs.
Right.
They may be suffering with mental health. There are some environmental things that are going on, but they have a place to land. Those neighbors of ours who don't have a place to land, those are the ones that make it on TV. Those are the ones who are truly experiencing, as we would define, homelessness.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, and I've actually volunteered in the facility that you're talking about. And part of that count is people aren't always aware of. This includes people who are staying or having to stay in their cars.
Correct.
In places that they can be safe for them. I think sometimes we're not, I also call it the unseen challenge, because we don't always recognize what's happening or going on. You're right. We attribute it to those things we see, or the news will capture those images, but it's also happening, as you mentioned, to, I think one of the terms is couch surfing, moving from place to place and trying to get some stability. So we'll dive into a little bit more of what your programs do. But before we do, let's also address affordable housing, because that also lends itself to some of the challenges that we're finding ourselves in. When I use that word, and I've even shied away from that term, I've moved to more attainable housing, because affordable housing in itself has a stigma associated with it. And we know there's challenges all across the community around those places. But when I use that term, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to your organization?
Affordable housing or attainable housing is, if you look at Kansas City, the AMI, the kind of that medium income is, in order to afford a place, you have to make about $42,000 a year. And that's not really enough. There's a saying that rent eats first.
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago, you could find in Kansas City an apartment for $800, maybe $900 bucks, and it's 2-bedroom. That same 2-bedroom apartment is going to cost you $1,400 a month now.
Yeah.
And if rent eats first, $1,400 a month is pretty tough to do. A lot of the folks that we deal with are making $15 to $18 an hour. Simple math, that doesn't add up to $40,000 a year. So if you've got that, and if you do have benefits, there's this thing called the cliff benefits that when you start making, let's call it 19, 20 bucks an hour, some of your temporary relief, your TANFs and your food stamps kind of go away.
Right.
So from a housing perspective, if rent eats first, there's just not a lot of places for our folks to go. And if you look at downtown Kansas City, where most of our folks experiencing homelessness hang out, prices are out of control.
Right.
We have developers that are coming in from outside Kansas City. I look at down Troost. We're on Troost, 3 miles both ways of where we're located. There's some very nice development going on, but the folks in the neighborhoods can't afford those places. So affordable housing is pretty tough.
Yeah, and I mean, you took a couple of my questions from me, and one of them was, why is that happening? And there's development, there's construction happening, but at a median or a price point that isn't attainable.
That's right.
Hence why I use the word attainable. Yeah, it's neat. We applaud it. I think the development is great. But as we've all learned in our life, we're phasing into life. Our income has to be able to provide for more than just the housing piece and being able to address those things.
That's right.
What other kind of challenges, opportunities you and your organization think about outside of just homelessness or attainable housing?
Attainable housing is a big one. The other one is looking at, I call them guest residents. We talk about trauma-informed.
Yeah.
We talk about strength-based case management. We talk about asset-based community development. We talk about all those things. But at the end of the day, we are geared with, we only do families. And a lot of our families have been in this generational cycle of kind of poverty.
Right.
And poverty is not just economic. It's emotional. It's a whole lot of different things. So there's mental health that gets involved really fast. There's environmental things. There's some systemic things. You can do a little homework on Troost Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. We can say that's gone, but it's not gone. There's still sides of the fence that housing gets kind of tough on. So as an organization, we're trying to address all of those things, and it's really hard. But there's a lot of organizations that are doing it differently, which is fine. What we're trying to do now is kind of create alliances and like-minded organizations. We're all trying to get together because we're trying to help the same folks.
Right.
We really are.
Yeah. And community is a team effort. And this is something that, I hope we're waking up to the fact that we all have to press into these topics. This isn't, hey, that's great for Community LINC and Michael Wilson and team. We hope they do a good job. And it's really not. I think that's one of the reasons why inviting you and others onto these podcasts is to expose us. We all need to be participants in this, one directly or indirectly. And let's use that as a segue to jump into the next part of the topic. Tell us a little bit about Community LINC, it as an organization, how long it's been around, and the various programs that you offer and that you're focused on as an organization.
Sure. So Community LINC has been around since 1988. So that's 30-some years. We do a few different things. Our campus at 40th and Troost is transitional housing. So it's just what it says. Folks who are stuck just need a place to kind of get a reset.
Right.
Come stay with us. Hopefully, I call it stat cash. Most of them come with some evictions or some debt or some other things that they got to take care of. So we want them to stay in savings mode so they can stay with us as long as they're moving forward on their, what we call a case plan, but whatever their life goals are.
Right.
So that's transitional housing. We also have rapid.
And I think real quick to connect the dot there, that's a great example of social determinants of health. That impacts a person's well-being. And so providing that, and people don't think about that as healthcare,
right?
But it impacts their healthcare dramatically.
It does.
Their physical health, their mental health, and their overall well-being. I think some of the things that we're trying to expose here for all of we serve, as you know, a wide variety of clients who serve cause and community extraordinarily well. And this whole notion that healthcare extends beyond acute or some kind of event is pretty big.
That's right.
And so when we talk about impacting care for the greater good, that's a great example to everyone of what we call social determinants of health, giving them safe housing, a place to live, to also then with a path towards getting to something more sustainable.
Right.
So I just wanted to interrupt that. So let's hit on the next one.
So it's transitional housing. Part of transitional housing, we also have some grant funding that helps us to rapidly rehouse folks. So little backstory, HUD brings all their money into Kansas City through the continuum of care. And the way they prioritize folks is it's called a name by name list. So the most vulnerable people that are in the Kansas City area that need housing go through that. We take referrals from them as well, and we can rapidly rehouse them. The other two programs we have, one is diversion. So someone who's maybe backed up on their rent or facing an eviction.
Yeah.
We have the ability to go in and help them. And
Right.
that looks different a lot of different ways. The average, once they get evicted, and there were 9,000 evictions in Kansas City last year, once they get evicted and put back into what I call the system, that can be a $35 drain on the system. So why wouldn't we spend a few dollars up front to help? So we do that. And hopefully we also establish some case management and some skills and some relationships to say, here's kind of what's going on here. But if you've got a mom or a dad with 7 kids and they're, again, making $20 an hour, at some point, going back to affordable housing, we have to give them some kind of help. So we help them kind of manage that.
Right.
And the last piece is outreach. We talked about the point in time survey. We have 2 outreach workers. They're looking for folks in the school districts. They're looking for folks under bridges and camps. They're doing that PIT survey today. So the hope is all folks aren't ready to change. Some folks, quite frankly, don't think they have a problem.
Yeah.
Homelessness is not a problem for them.
Right.
So we're trying to establish relationships and say, when you get ready, call us.
Yeah.
We can figure out what those resources look like. It may not always be us. It may be one of our partners. So it's that transition, diversion, and outreach. And then lastly, we do a little bit in affordable housing. We've been there in that space for about 4 years. They've just recently established their own 501c3. So we'll be kind of not spinning them off, but kind of putting our arm around them and helping them kind of do their own thing this calendar year.
And I think that's become a major focal point of every city and community. I don't think there's one community that isn't having that discussion. And I remember I was part of a team that met with mayors from across the region to introduce this topic. And it was a little before its time, because when we were talking about affordable housing, you're like, you're in the suburbs. What's this all about? And we've been going through that education piece, and you've been living the reality on it.
Yep.
So first of all, those are amazing programs that are going on that are making a difference. So I think it's really exciting and encouraging to know that those are available. Unfortunately, those don't hit the headlines and they don't hit the news.
That's right.
And they're making a difference each and every day. You mind sharing a couple stories, success stories of things that you're really proud about that your organization has done in making an impact on someone's life?
Sure. I'll use one that I'm familiar with. So we've had a father. He was an over-the-road truck driver. He was working in the Northeast or Northwest. Doesn't really matter. And his wife got sick. So he was on the road under a contract. His wife got sick, some sort of cancer, I believe. One of the kids called and said, "Dad, Mom's really sick." So Dad couldn't get home. But by the time Dad got home, they'd gotten evicted. They lost everything. So 2 kiddos, Mom. Dad came back. Mom passed away recently as soon as Dad got back. So now he's sitting there with an eviction that he didn't know anything about. Also lost his job. So we brought them on campus June-ish, July-ish, kind of when I got there. He's been stacking cash. He currently has a job now. But the beauty of our organization is he can stay in a rent-free environment as long as he's moving forward. So maybe he has some eviction. I don't know what his eviction is. Most of our folks have up to $10,000 worth of eviction. But even if you're making $15, $20 an hour, you can still stack some money and pay off your eviction. So our hope is that they can actually do that as opposed to going out and getting some other kind of government funding.
Yeah.
I talk to my staff all the time about how do we get them off of that government funding? Because that government funding isn't designed to be a way of life. It's designed to help you kind of bridge that gap. So part of it is educational because some of our guests systemically, that's the way they do things. They just go out and find resources and money. So it's that whole freedom thing. How do we talk freedom to folks? So Brian's doing very well. There's days that he struggles a bit, but he's doing well. He's doing very well.
I think in that situation, if your organization didn't exist and a person finds himself in that situation, what typically happens?
If they're lucky, and I'll say that again, if they're lucky, they can find their way to a homeless shelter for families.
Right.
But there's not a lot of beds in Kansas City that do that. So we're trying to bridge that gap between a shelter, because we're not technically a shelter. We're different. So he wouldn't have a lot of choices.
And that's why I wanted to bring that up. I don't think everyone's always aware there are gaps within even the safety net that we have. And you're helping some of the most vulnerable at a critical point in the time. And your organization stepped forward in a very big way to provide needs and services that ultimately it would be even more, it would have to get worse before it got better.
Yep.
And in my mind, in our previous conversations, you're stepping in at a very critical time before things escalate, if you will, in a manner. As you think about, shelters, and you mentioned that a few times, crisis centers, and I know you've previously worked at one.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have enough shelters in our communities across the country?
We do not. There are not enough beds. Kansas City is trying to solve that problem, but it's a problem. There's men's beds in Kansas City. I worked in 2 different shelters, and there were probably 400 men's beds in Kansas City. Now there's probably 300 men's beds in Kansas City. So men's not necessarily an issue. When it gets cold, it is.
Yeah.
That's why places like Hope Faith open up shelters.
Right.
My heart goes out to families and women. There's not a lot of women's shelters, not a lot of women beds.
Yeah.
And there's even less family beds in Kansas City. So it is a huge need. And I know Kansas City's trying to kind of work through that and some things that they're
Yeah.
trying to do and looking at different models. But there's just not enough beds for those experiencing homelessness in Kansas City.
And this isn't unique to Kansas City. This is in communities all across our country, and times have changed. Things have changed, and community engagement has changed. And this is one of the areas that every community is having to look at and say, how can we provide the right help and need? And I think part of that is organizations like yourself. Now, not everyone has a community link in their organizations, and I would ask you is, as you think about looking forward and the things that we need to impact over the next year, 3 years, and 5 years, what are some of the things that you're thinking about, or what some of the things you're hopeful for, in us continuing to make a positive impact in our communities?
So we've talked about one of them. That's the whole housing stability. It's an issue. How do we figure out the housing stability piece? That's not our wheelhouse, but we're definitely involved with folks who that is their wheelhouse. How do we deal with economic mobility? So some of our folks, and I tell our staff, we have guest groups. Some of our guests are unemployed. Some of our guests are underemployed. So what does that look like to get that further education or to get that certificate that takes you from $12 an hour to $18 an hour? So how do we do that? There are folks that'll do that, but they're sort of doing it in silos. So how do we figure that out? And then the other umbrella that I'm trying to work with our groups is kind of that whole wellness. Mental health is real. It's an issue. Unfortunately, a lot of our families that come, they don't even do physical health well. When's the last time you went to a doctor? Well, I don't have a doctor. So how do we start having those conversations and doing it through relationship? It can't be transactional. Hey, go see your doctor, go see your dentist, and make sure you do all that before you come to your next case management meeting.
Right.
That's transitional. We can't do that. We have to be relational. Hey, meet them where they are. What's the most pressing thing in your world right now? What do you want to change right now? What goal do you have between now and next week?
Yeah.
So if you look at kind of those housing stability, economic stability, and then our mission statement is we're going to end homelessness in Kansas City for this generation and the next. Yes, that's very aspirational. But I always get stuck on our last piece is what are we doing for that next generation? So mom and dad and grandma may have been stuck in this cycle, but how do we talk to those kiddos about what does it look like to be not stuck in this cycle? How do we do that? We have children's programming twice a week, and we're very intentional about that. We're trying to get involved in the school districts and help moms and dads kind of navigate that whole, what is an IEP? I don't know what an IEP is. They're telling me my kid's got problems. How do we go and help those folks? So how do we become less of a service and more of a, let's just meet you where you are?
Right.
What's the most pressing thing in your world right now? Sometimes it's not always what they think it is.
Yeah.
So how do we have those conversations? So right now it's sort of transactional. How do we move and make it relational? So that's the direction we're moving in.
It's powerful. You're listening to the Everyday Matters podcast, and I'm talking with Michael Wilson today, part of Community LINC. He's the executive director, and he's sharing some amazing focus and effort and work that he and his team are doing to make a difference, to help those who find themselves at a very vulnerable time in their life and their story. And what Michael just shared, I really liked from the aspirational piece. I love that it's aspirational because I like that you're talking about moving from transactional to relational. And that's part of the whole care continuum. We need to think differently about how we provide care. Yes, we can do things in a point in time or spot in time, but if we don't do something more systematic in helping bridge those things, then all we're doing is helping for a period of time until the next thing happens.
Right.
And you spoke about that earlier, the cycle, that you're trying to break the cycle within those conversations. I want to dive into a couple of hard topics as we come into the last part of our segment here, and that is, how can people help? Let's begin first with stigma. What is the things that people think when they hear about homelessness or unhoused and those things that they're just wrong about?
I hear a lot of folks say it's a choice. They choose to be homeless.
Yeah.
If they just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, they could do better. That's not always the case. We've got guests that don't know what better even looks like. They don't even have a frame of reference for what better looks like or could look like.
Right.
That's why I go back to we meet them where they are, and we have those hard conversations. So that's probably the biggest stigma. A couple other the stigmas are if you just worked harder and got a better job, you
Right.
get out of homelessness.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm a single mom who just came out of the foster care system and has 2 kids, and I don't even have a high school education, I can't just go get a better job. There's a lot of steps in between that.
Yeah.
So we try to walk along with them as they go through that. But some of the stigma is they're flying signs and they're just bums. Well, no, bums and hobos left in the 80s, right? We don't have bums and hobos anymore.
Yeah.
We have folks experiencing homelessness, and we need to meet them where they are.
Yeah. I appreciate your honesty and directness on it. And that is absolutely, I think, the stigma that hinders people from pressing in and helping. I was at the last shelter with you and was able to spend some time down there, and it was a great experience. I mean, it was amazing to see the work going on, to be able to see I don't know if you remember, but there was an education class as people are not just getting their high school degrees, but looking to get the college education or their vocational certificates, being able to go do that. And it was in a library. And people, when you think of a shelter, they don't have those kind of concepts. And yet I remember you saying, Tom, this is where people are and they need to feel like people.
Mm-hmm.
And that hit home and hard, because I think sometimes even the word shelter is a bad term. And at the end of the day, as you spoke about, that there's a person, a dad, a mom, a brother or sister, a child that is trying to find their best day forward.
That's right.
And without those places, they don't know what a best day looks like. And that's why organizations such as yourself are so vitally important to the things that we're doing. Let's talk about the person. What can people do? I mean, yes, we'll include the links, and you have a nonprofit and donations always welcome. You have some great fundraisers throughout the years. I think I saw you had Kansas City Chiefs player down there recently, right?
MVS came down and hung out with the kiddos for Christmas. It was awesome.
So who's MVS for those who aren't familiar?
He's a Chiefs tight end. Marquez Valdez Scanling, I believe.
You got it.
MVS because I messed the name up all the
Yeah,
time.
no, you
I
nailed
apologize
it.
to him again.
Yeah, well, no, you nailed it. So, and that's awesome, because while that is more than just a person showing up, it's raising awareness. And in my path and how I think about how we all make a difference, awareness is the first place. You don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
And so creating that awareness is big. The next one is action. As you said, I just need more help. Tom, I need more help. If you want to just come help, that would be great. And then that last part is the advocacy part, is when you do those first two, you're informed about a subject, you're rolling up your sleeves and jumping in and helping. It's also teaching and informing the community, the advocacy. What are some things that there's a person listening right now that says, you know what, I want to do something more than just feel bad. I want to do something more than just saying, what can I do? What would you tell them?
I call it the 3 E's. First, you have to get exposed, and you have to get engaged. And once you get engaged, you'll eventually get entangled. So come down and see what we do. We have kids programming twice a week. We have plenty of volunteer opportunities. There's two kinds of volunteers. Some volunteers want to interact with our guests. Some volunteers don't want to interact with our guests because they can't handle it emotionally. I get that. So there's things from flipping apartments. We're always flipping an apartment. Families are moving out. Come clean up an apartment. If you want to engage with the moms, understand a lot of our moms, they don't have mentors. They don't have people that breathe into their lives. So have a meal. Bring a meal. Twice a week. So I always tell you to just show up. We'll do a tour, and at some point you'll go, yeah, I'm going to try that, and try a few things.
Yeah.
You'll eventually realize this is what I want to go do. Obviously, monetary donations are always fun, but that's time, talent. Yeah, but just show up.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to give a tour. Hit our website. Say you want to come do a tour with Michael, and we'll find a time for you to come do a tour with Michael. It'll be a quick nickel tour, and I'm sure we'll leave you guessing.
Well, we'll include that all within the notes so that people can easily click on that. And we'll even put tour with Michael on there.
Perfect.
Right. And we'll make that happen. What about, we have a listener who's not in our community, not in the city. Mm-hmm. How do they find an organization like yours within their own community that they can get engaged in? Where would they go look that up to be able to get connected with them?
So all major cities have a continuum of care. So in Kansas City, it's the Greater Kansas City Alliance to End Homelessness. Just Google homelessness in your city, and it'll come up. Or you could Google homeless shelters in your city. It's pretty easy to find a homeless shelter to get involved with. Very easy.
Should people be talking to their elected officials about this topic?
No. Why would we ever do that? Absolutely, we should be talking to our elected officials. We start more at the city level because a lot of those dollars go through the city of Kansas City. So we have a couple commissioners and folks on staff that we're talking to, and what we're trying to do is I'll go back to that continuum. We've got the shelters. I used to work at shelters.
Yeah.
There's a lot of noise now. Noise is not the right word. Talking about low barrier shelters, just
Right.
letting people in where they are.
Yeah.
And some of our shelters have kind of some religious affiliations,
Yeah.
and everything's a barrier. We got to make you take a shower. You got to pray. Those are barriers. So we're talking in Kansas City about what does it look like to be from that safety net all the way to getting housed, and how do we work together as a team? And we're
Yeah.
working through that. So yeah, we're obviously involved at the city level. We're obviously involved at the state level.
Yeah.
We're not that much involved at the national level, but we have associations that do that for us and with us. So you definitely have to get the dollars.
And I think you just triggered another thought. Every city has a website that often has the links of these organizations within there.
It does.
And I agree. And when I was talking about elected officials, local is where people need to get connected.
Absolutely.
Council members, commissioners, because that's where this is where these topics are happening,
That's right.
and where we all have to roll up our sleeves to work together. Maybe some of the most pressing topics within our community. So if you're listening and you're asking yourself, where can I go get engaged at? You can actually start on your city or even your county webpage, because they're going to have these types of resources on there to be able to give help. Last couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
As you look ahead 3-5 years, aspirational vision, what you're hopeful for, help us dream with you on what you want to see happening over the next 3 to 5 years.
Great question. I would like to see, and there's steps to do this. I'd like to see those of us who are dealing with the issues of homelessness in Kansas City have more of I'll call it an alliance. The sad reality is only 1% of the federal budget goes towards human services.
Right.
That's not a lot. So we're all kind of chasing those same dollars, but there's government money I don't want. There's government money that I do want. So how do we get together and talk about in terms of, here's the pie. What do you do really well? Do I want to deal with the continuum of care? Maybe. But those folks that are kind of stuck under a bridge and just need to stack some cash, what do we do really well? So I'm talking to our staff about what's our niche.
Right.
When we were working in the men's shelter, what's our niche? What do we do differently than the others? Because there's 2 shelters in town. So what's the niche? So we all kind of figure out what our niche is and be flexible and nimble, because needs are going to change. We're getting ready to do a strategic plan for our organization, and all the strategists want to do a 10-year plan. I'm not trying to do a 10-year plan. Give me a 3 to 5 year plan, because it's going to change.
Yeah.
So
10 years is a long time.
We're working through that. So 5 years ago when we did one, affordable housing was the big deal. Now we're trying to do one, and it's, what are those big issues?
Yeah.
And some of it's daycare.
Yeah.
We've got moms on staff that are on campus that can't get a job because there's nowhere to put their kiddos.
Yeah.
So do I want to run a daycare on campus? No. Do I want a daycare on campus? Absolutely.
Right.
Why don't I find a partner that can do that for us so the moms can go to work? So it's looking at those things that are the barriers.
Right.
And how do we address the barriers? Because as I said earlier, all of our families aren't the same. That mom with 1 kid who's underemployed is different than that mom with 8 kids who's on Social Security.
Right.
We can't treat them the same.
Right.
So how do we have different guest groups and figure out how to let that mom live a flourishing life? Because it's all about flourishing and joy.
So I heard 3 things: more communication amongst all the organizations around what everyone's doing, more collaboration, if you will. And that is, how can we, I love the daycare example. Why do we need to go do that? We can just go partner with someone. And, I've spoken with many people in the nonprofit organization, and, there is this thing of terminal uniqueness where, everybody has great, meaningful intentions, but there's not always working together well. And that third one is synchronization, because if we can synchronize better, then we can meet them where they're at, or that point of care of where they need something, so that we can offer the right type of care at the right time in the right way to make that impact before something serious or something happens. Last one, and I've known you for years now, and anybody who knows Michael Wilson, if there is a volunteer opportunity or something to do to help other people, you've always been there. You have one of the biggest and most amazing hearts as a human being I've ever known. I know that's why you're in your role now. And it's contagious. To be around you is inspiring and challenging and convicting to be able to go do those things. So first of all, I want to say thank you, because you model what it means to make a difference in the cause and community in the lives of people. And you do it with no fanfare. I've been trying to get you to do this podcast now for a long time. And here you are, because this is not what you do well. You like to show up and do that. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
And I think, too, what I'd like for you to do is to give that encouragement or charge to a person who's moved from sitting in back of the seat to the front of the seat. And they're just about there. They want to do something. They're telling themselves, my impact won't matter. It's not a difference. I don't know what I would do. What would you say to them to encourage them to move off the front of the seat and actually jump in?
Sort of personal. I think you have to figure out what your passion is. My passion is not animals. It's not. My passion is not geriatrics. It's just not. My passion is families that are stuck in generational poverty. So once you figure out what your passion is, go try different things. Volunteer somewhere. It could be at a church. It could be at Community LINC. It could be wherever. But don't be afraid to fail. And if you walk away from an experience and you go, I didn't like that experience, don't go back. That's okay. If you come to Community LINC and you don't like it, that's okay. But let's talk about what your passion is. Some people don't know what their passion is. I'm always going to go back to this. I think there's this thing called integrity of the human being. Everyone is unique. So you have a unique thing. You have a unique purpose. I taught this in a class a couple of weeks ago. There's two of the most important days in your life: the day you're born and the day you figure out why you're born. So figure out why you were born and go do that. That's what's gotten me to Community LINC. So if you're that person sitting on a chair, man, what charges you up? Go do that. And if it's walking a dog, go walk a dog. If it's coming to hang out with little kids at 40th and Truce, man, come hang out with our kiddos on 40th and Truce. They will rock your socks, I promise you. And you will go home changed.
Well, I think that's an amazing invitation to be changed. And I think in a time and age and world that we live in, we're all looking to do something better. We've seen what the challenges of connection and communication have gotten us, and we know that we can do better. And that's what today's podcast is all about. It's the opportunity to talk with individuals like Michael Wilson, who has found his passion, is pressed in to make a difference. And what we hope is that through these conversations, each of us are encouraged or inspired to do the thing, as Michael said, that makes us passionate, that makes us want to engage and make a difference. And most importantly, that whether in word or deed, we have the opportunity to make every day matter. Like Michael said, what in the 10-year plan? What are we doing right now? What can we do tomorrow? That's what these podcasts are all about, so that we can all learn, unlearn, and relearn from each other, because a better community is in front of us. And the ask is, what will our participation be? Michael, thank you very much for what you and your team do. Thank you for Community LINC, the lives that you're changing and reminding us what community is all about. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Until next time, we look forward to our conversations. And please, let's all remember, let's do our part to make every day matter.
You've been listening to Everyday Matters, a Netsmart podcast. Keep connected with us by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you like what you've heard, please rate the show. That helps us keep sharing the stories that inspire our communities. Thanks for listening. Until next time.